Hello, I'm Gil Zilkha. Welcome back to my channel, Essential Classical Music, where we look at the best recordings of the classical music repertoire. This video is taken out of my larger video on the major chamber works. I hope you enjoy it. So that's the cello suites. So that's this sort of giant, sort of Mount Everest for cellist. Bach also wrote a set of 6 works that are considered the Mount Everest for solo violin. The 3 sonatas and 3 partitas for solo violin. And these are also wonderful works. They also vary between fast and slow. A lot of familiar things like the gavotte and rondo. However, we have to, of course, discuss what is the one single piece that's probably considered the Mount Everest for violin playing. That's the chaconne, which is the final movement of the 2nd partita. This is like one of the great masterworks of all of written music, really. I mean, it's right up there with the Macarena. I mean, I'm kidding about the Macarena part. Although they do kind of complement each other. I mean, you have, Macarena, and then dun, 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 real serious music, the chaconne. It's just, it really takes you for a ride. I mean, it's just, every time I hear it without fail, no matter how many times, I marvel at just what a composition this is. So that's definitely a highlight. Okay, so of course, there's going to be a slew of violinists who have tackled this work as well. My top choice for this one is Henryk Szeryng. This is recorded in 1967, Deutsche Grammophon. Good vintage sound, it's in stereo, nice and full. And what Szeryng brought to it was just a real keen musical mind. He also really did a great job of really finding a balance between virtuosity and also really feeling the music and having a real delicacy as well. The chaconne is wonderfully dramatic. He had a really sweet timbre, but it wasn't like overly sweet. So it's really an ideal version. Now, he did do one in the 50s as well. This is released on Sony. I'm not sure if Sony was the original or not, but it was like 1955. And it's also excellent. The sound it's only slightly a little bit more rough compared to the Deutsche Grammophon. And in terms of interpretation, it's also wonderful. I think of it as just a compliment. If you want to just geek out on Szeryng Bach versions, you certainly don't need this one, but I think it's really wonderful to hear him when he's slightly younger and slightly fresher. And of course, with all these, there's 6 pieces, there's always different insights you can get from different versions. Now, next, I want to recommend another very famous version. I mentioned it in my Bach references as one of the reference versions of these works, and that's, of course, Nathan Milstein. This is also Deutsche Grammophon. This was recorded in 1973. Very good sound. And Milstein particularly brought that dramatic virtuosity, this real intensity. So it works really well in the chaconne, which is a really serious dramatic work, for example. Another artist with a keen musical mind, very elegant in the way he phrased. So this is also unmissable. And like Szeryng, there is also a version from the mid-50s that I also want to recommend from Milstein. That's this EMI version. The sound is a little bit more dry. There's a little bit more of an immediacy to his sound. And this one I would say that for me, I tend to favor this one a little bit because there's just a little bit more energy that I detect from Milstein in this. But again, just like with the Szeryng, if you like them both, you might as well get them both. They're both recommendable. Now, another very famous version is this one from Arthur Grumiaux. This is from the early 60s, very good Philips sound, and sort of a contrast to Milstein, I would say. Maybe kind of complements Milstein very well. He's not as assertively dramatic. He's more, Grumiaux gives you more sort of the unaffected, more natural interpretation. It's very pristine sounding. He had a very beautiful tone. And with works like this, before you know it, you're just, you're under the spell of the music. So that's really a wonderful experience. So these are justly famous recordings. Now, another famous one, this one time in digital sound, this comes from the mid-'80s, Itzhak Perlman. Now, Perlman gives you more of the kind of the lush, proverbial romantic view, very sweet-toned, obvious feeling. I know there's at least one, probably several videos of him on YouTube playing the chaconne, and that classic Perlman intensity that you see that he's given to the music is all. It's really also unmissable if you love these works. Incidentally, I have to give this little anecdote. Perlman, of course, is Israeli. My family on my father's side is Israeli. And back in the 1950s, my uncle was working in a TV studio. And he was having lunch with my dad, or they were meeting for lunch. And so he told him, come over to the studio. I want you to see this kid that we're filming who has polio, and he plays the violin. Didn't give the name, of course, because he wasn't a famous violinist yet. But of course, that was Perlman. So my dad got to go to the studio and watch Perlman in his, I think he's probably like around 13 or something, perform Bach's Gavotte and Rondo, which we talked about. Da, 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 da. So that's really kind of cool. Actually, I'm going to go see Perlman in just a few weeks for my on my birthday weekend. So it's really cool that he's still out there performing after all these, over half a century now. All right, so that's Perlman. Here's a version from the mid-'50s that I want to recommend. Johanna Martzy, wonderful violinist. There's, I think, a box that EMI or Warner EMI has put out that's got most of her recordings. I recommended her Mendelssohn Concerto. That's excellent. Her Brahms Concerto is also excellent. She has more of a, kind of like Perlman, she has more of a romantic style. Very ruminative. She really thinks deeply, really felt. It's maybe a little bit on the slower side, but if you like that kind of more lush romantic view, this is excellent. The sound is pretty good. It's a little bit more limited because it's the mid-'50s, but it's wonderful artistry. Now, for something quite different, closer to our time, slightly, I guess, the late 90s, we have this version from Rachel Podger. Now, Podger plays Baroque violin, so it's a half a step low, and it's obviously it's more straight tone, a little bit less lush, but this is really a gorgeous version. This is kind of the modern classic, and it really brings out elements of the works that really make you appreciate it in a different way. It's really sort of a hypnotic effect because it's more a little bit, it's not, how to put it, overly done in terms of the emotions. It's more the kind of this pristine purity to it that really, really brings out the beauty of the works in a different way. So highly recommended. And then I want to go back in time to a few proverbial, classics of the pre-stereo age. One is from someone who was a teenager when he recorded this, Yehudi Menuhin. This is one of those, gramophone classics. This came from the mid-'30s. And Menuhin, as you might expect being a teenager, there's a freshness to it. He just had a wonderful instinctive artistry. The chaconne is really gorgeous. It's not as, the whole set, it's not as like maybe dramatic as you might get with Milstein, but there's something about seeing these works through a young person's eyes, especially someone like Menuhin, and he had such a beautiful, beautiful tone, even with the '30s recordings that you can hear. This is really a classic for a good reason. However, I also need to recommend another recording from Menuhin's teacher, George Enescu. Unfortunately, this did not come out until this was recorded in the I think early '40s. So he was actually a little bit more up in years, and he wasn't as technically proficient as he would have been if he had recorded a few decades a few decades earlier. But Enescu was just a brilliant artistic mind, very passionate musician. And if you love these works, this is something you're not going to want to miss either. The chaconne is just dripping with drama and pathos, and there's just all these wonderful musical insights. Even if at times you can tell that the technique cannot quite keep up with what the artistic mind is doing, probably a result of his being up in years. The recording quality is okay for the time, but again, it's a solo violin, so you're not having to worry too much about being able to hear what's going on. It's pretty clear. So a really, really great version of these works. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day and happy listening.